Okay, so November 27th, Friday, Q&A session. We'll start with some questions from yesterday. Start where Longpor left off. Thank you for offering Thanksgiving online, which allows me to integrate monastic practice in my home life. Please consider to provide online retreats again and again. Is there a monthly or ongoing practice group online that I can join? We'll see whether we do this next year or not. It does seem to be working out incredibly well. And we won't be doing anything like this during our winter retreat, which is January 1st to April 1st. But we'll see. We'll see next year. We've got the setup for it, and we can fine-tune things. And in terms of a monthly ongoing practice, we were going to announce at the end of the retreat and give Zoom codes for this. But there is like a first Tuesday of every month, which was the first Tuesday at Berkeley. We would go to Berkeley every first Tuesday, and of every month, except during our winter retreat, and we would give a teaching, meditation, Q&A there. And that's become an online event, and it's now become just the first Tuesday because people are joining in from all over the world, not just Berkeley. And we were going to announce about that. That's happening December 1st. That'll be Longpor Pasano doing Q&A with people for an hour or so. And so people are welcome to join with that. And also there is a Upasika Day coming up, which again used to be kind of exclusive to people who had joined up with our Upasika program, but now that it's online, it just makes sense to open it up to more people, and that's December 5th, 1 p.m. to 5 p.m., and so we're also going to announce and give the codes for that at the end of this retreat. So there is those are two things that people can continue to plug into. Next question. Dear Ajahn, in the practice of mindfulness of the body, if the mind prefers to practice awareness of body postures, e.g. walking meditation, and not mindfulness of breathing or the mind prefers mindfulness of the 32 parts of the body and not mindfulness of breathing, can one progress in the path? Is it compulsory to practice mindfulness of breathing? Sadhu and immense gratitude to Longpor Pasano, the Ajahns, and the Abhayagiri community for this blessed opportunity to attend this retreat on Zoom, and may Longpor Pasano have a speedy recovery and be well and healthy for longest possible. Generally, like Longpor Pasano was talking about the other day, like he has this foundational practice of mindfulness of breathing, and for most people that's going to be the case. So that tends to be the foundation where then once the mind has a modicum of tranquility and calm, and it's not just distracted and all over the place, then there is the ability to focus more on things like 32 parts of the body, mindfulness of postures, and so on. I don't know if you would want to. I can't give a categorical answer as to whether you'd be able to progress on the path or not if you weren't doing mindfulness of breathing in conjunction with those things. But I can say that it's very important to have the mindfulness of breathing. It's as a foundational practice, and whether it's Buddho or body awareness, the mindfulness of breathing, because the breath process is something we can always come back to. So it goes part and parcel with mindfulness of the body. Another one along kind of the same lines. In the discourse on mindfulness of breathing, one trains to breathe in and out, tranquilizing the bodily formations and tranquilizing the mental formations. How does one practice this tranquilizing? Is it something done passively by being mindful of the breath, or actively somehow? Also, any tips on how to be aware of the breath without feeling the need to control or direct the breath? Tranquilizing bodily formations, the way I think about this is I usually use the phrase consciously calming the whole body. I breathe in, consciously calming the whole body. I breathe out. And for me, that's like the just previous step to that is experiencing the whole body. I breathe in, experiencing the whole body, I breathe out. And then that has informed me like where there might be tension in the body, whether it's in the eyes or the face or the shoulders or where out, then having noted where the tension is, then one can consciously calm those areas, and that can actually help with the mind. So there's kind of like a progression there. And then tranquilizing the mental formations, I think of, the Buddha is kind of, he doesn't like, and the Krupa Ajahns will teach like this too, like do whatever you can to achieve ... So do whatever you can. Say there's a story or a train of thought that just won't stop. And so we might actually have to use a thought process, and that will be a way to tranquilize those mental formations. So actually teaching ourselves, we have to teach ourselves the thought process or running it to a logical conclusion. What if I got what I wanted? What if that actually did happen? What would the logical conclusion be? And then trying to get it to run out. And or Lee, he's a disciple of Ajahn Ñāṇiko and passed away many, many years ago, I think 1959 possibly, it was a really long time ago. But of Wat Asokaram in Bangkok, in Thailand, and he would teach mindfulness of breathing. How he got his mind to calm down one time when he couldn't stop thinking about that disrobe. So that's when he was a young monk, before he was a teacher, and so he had these particular mental happen, and then he played it out in his mind, like, okay, I'd have to find a job, and I'd probably get married, and I'd have some kids, and then I would work at this job, and then I'd have to feed them, and they would die, and I would be heartbroken, and maybe something would happen to my spouse, my partner, and I would be heartbroken, and then I would end up going to the monastery and ordaining. And so he ended up back at square one in this, working this story out to its conclusion, and in that way he was able to allay those doubts. So sometimes we have to get creative. So we say to breathe naturally while doing Anapanasati. That's generally the teaching. But it always feels a little bit unnatural. There's always the more the mind becomes refined and it sees the breath, and there's always some sort of intentionality with it linked in there. So that's good to see. And sometimes we do want to control the breathing, say if we might need deep breathing to bring up some energy or whatever. I don't think there's ever going to be completely, well, it's going to be hard being mindful of that feeling, looking at that feeling and seeing that that's present, that that's there, that's part of the experience. we don't need to, I think the bigger issue is we don't need to try to get rid of that feeling. We don't need to try to get rid of the feeling that we need to control the breath. So there's the breath, we're breathing naturally, and then there's the feeling of needing to control the breath. And that's the whole experience. That's looking into that experience and just seeing it and investigating it. When we say investigating, we don't mean necessarily thinking a lot about it or trying to figure it out, but investigating in terms of looking at it with mindfulness. And when we look at it with mindfulness, it'll become interesting, it'll change in various ways. It might even change into something we didn't think it was before. Maybe there's perception there, also kind of interpreting the situation. So just mindful of the whole experience. It should only take 5 years to become a stream enterer. Well, I don't know if he said it just like that, and Luangpo Pasano would be able to speak more to this, but I think there's one place where Luangpo Cha said something like, if you aren't a stream enterer after being a monk for 5 years, you've been wasting your time. So I think the hint there is like 5 years of solid mindfulness, solid precepts, solid mindfulness, not getting distracted away from the practice. And I do remember an ordination ceremony. I was still, I might have still been in It should take 5 years, but actually it takes longer. So just the acknowledgement that for most of us, we're going to lose the plot, we're going to get pulled away by various distractions, and it's just the main thing is making that long-term commitment and not really caring how long it takes. There's also a story about Thailand to some famous Ajahn and was like, sat down, got to meet with this Ajahn, and they asked, how long does it take to get enlightened? And the Ajahn said, 10 years. And they said, 10 years? What? And he said, 20 years. And then they said, 20 years? You got to be kidding me. And then he said, for you, 30 years. So that kind of akaliko, that's the timeless, like I interpret that also as like just letting go of time, just getting on with things. When I'm meditating, I feel like instead of being aware of the object, like the breath, I'm aware of a mental image of the object. My perception is not direct. I don't know how else to explain it. Is this normal? I would say it's not normal, but it's good. That's like how Ajahn Buddhadasa talks about meditation when you're doing breath meditation. And at a certain point when the mind starts to become quite refined, then the breath disappears and it's replaced with a nimitta of the breath, or a sign. And we call that the sign of... it's not a bad thing, and you could even experiment with going into that mental image of the object rather than the external object itself, and see what happens. Dear Ajahn, when working on the third and fourth parts of right effort, I still feel like I am cheating, like I should be doing something harder or less pleasant. How do we overcome these old habits of thinking? And how do we balance out all four parts of right effort? Thank you, Bhante, to you and the whole team. So the third and fourth parts of right effort, I assume you're talking about developing and maintaining. So developing wholesome mental states and maintaining wholesome mental states that have arisen. And so developing wholesome states, things like metta or happiness itself. These are very wholesome. As Luang Por Pasano was talking about, the niramisa sukha, the spiritual or the mental happiness, and maintaining those things, doing what we can to maintain those things. If it's pleasant, that's fine. I mean, at a certain point, it'll probably get difficult again. There'll be dukkha to come up, so we don't need to make it come up faster. We don't need to do anything special to make it hard for ourselves. And the practice is, we've, like on this retreat, we've put forth quite a bit of effort already, and the fruits of that is we might be experiencing some pleasant mental states, and that's good. And then just to abide in that and not be afraid to just dwell in that and just make much of that, rest within that. So the old habits of thinking, that's just don't go easily, and they're very tricky as well. They can find ways to use the Dhamma to justify themselves even. How do we balance out all four parts of right effort? I would say time and place, like based on what's coming up. That's how it becomes balanced. It's not like we do, keeping unwholesome states from arising, abandoning unwholesome states that have arisen, developing wholesome mental states, and maintaining wholesome mental states that have arisen. It's not like we do all four things exactly the same amount of time, and we don't basically like choose one and go through them. It's more based on like, okay, well, there's something unwholesome coming up. That should be abandoned. Let me see what I can do to abandon that. Or like, I have this particular tendency, it'd be good to see what I can do to keep that from arising. So again, it's like experimenting, and each individual is going to be different. That's why the Buddha spoke more in like a broad brush way. In terms of the nitty-gritty of the practice, it's going to depend on our conditioning, on where we're at in the practice, on how long we've been meditating, what kind of things we're drawn toward. Or there may be like, say, a sense of ease and happiness, and say, okay, what can I do to maintain this? What sort of mental factors need to be in place to maintain this? So they all kind of go together. Is there a mystical side to the Buddha's teachings? Does mysticism play any role in the practice/path? 2, what is the relationship between contentment and confidence, and how can these qualities be developed? I mean, I guess it depends on what you think of as mystical. Like, like there is like psychic powers in Buddhism, but the Buddha didn't place emphasis on those. He said there's 3 types of psychic powers. There's the psychic powers, mind reading, that can be developed as a psychic power, and there's I'm going to back up a bit. I'm not going to call them psychic powers. I'm going to call them miracles. So there's three types of miracles, and the first type of miracle is the miracle of supernormal abilities. Say, like, for example, to be able to fly, or the quick feet, like talking about in the story of Angulimala. Then there's the miracle of mind reading, the ability to read the minds of others. Then there's the miracle of instruction, the ability to instruct others in a way that actually benefits them. And the Buddha said of those three types of miracles, it is talked about in the suttas and in the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha didn't place real emphasis on that. And he really criticized monks who displayed their psychic powers publicly, which also happened in the time of the Buddha. There was monks who did that in the Buddha, and it created quite an uproar. And then the Buddha really criticized them for displaying those kind of abilities. In terms of like mysticism, like the getting into the mystique of the Buddha. In terms of like a contemplation, like Buddha Nusati, you could get mystical if you want to. You could think of previous Buddhas and possible future Buddhas, and just the cosmological significance of Buddhas in the universe. Those two. Like if you're content, then you become confident, and when you develop confidence, you have a sense of contentment in that. Those are developed through just the practice, especially practicing long-term, things like keeping precepts long-term and reflecting, wow, I've been, completely celibate for nearly 20 years or whatever. That can bring a sense of confidence in the practice, or like I've been keeping the precept of, not drinking alcohol for so long that you can take joy in that, and that can develop both contentment and confidence. So but also like different recollections, like Buddha Nusati, or if we are able to develop goodwill for ourselves and others, metta kammatthana, that can also help to develop contentment and confidence. Sometimes I doubt myself and have difficulty making decisions. For example, feeling guilt about turning down a friend's request that I didn't feel comfortable with. Any advice? Yeah, sometimes we got to draw boundaries. That's very important in living with each other. It's very difficult to do and something I'm personally not good at. And I also can empathize with that sense of feeling guilty or feeling bad about turning down like a request. But sometimes it might be like a really, unreasonable request or something which puts a big burden on us. And sometimes it's good just to explain it, just to explain like, I can't fulfill that particular request because ... And that can help the other person to develop empathy for us as well, because it's not just one-sided. We're developing empathy for, say, the person making the request we're uncomfortable with. We're developing empathy for them, which shows that the fact that we feel bad when we aren't able to fulfill their request, that shows our empathy for them. But then it has to go both ways too, like expressing my need for that's important as well. And I think even just that, in terms of making decisions, some decisions there's no clear like it's going to be good this way or it's going to be bad that way. There's always these nuances and gray areas, but we also don't want to freeze up with doubt and just not do anything. So we do need to move forward somehow if we have to make a decision about something. And a lot of it is just having the courage to make a decision and the willingness to accept responsibility if it was the wrong decision, and the willingness to adjust if it was wrong or if it leads to some sort of failure, then the willingness to investigate why that was and adjust and make a better decision in the future, rather than tormenting ourselves needlessly over say, making a wrong decision or failing in some way. This comes up a lot with taking on responsibility. You know, this is a difficult position, and a lot of times people aren't happy with, you know, the decisions I would make or the projects I would decide to focus on in the monastery, and I would feel that it would have been better just to not do it in the first place. Then I wouldn't have to deal with all this criticism and people being unappreciative or whatever. But then later on I started to see the folly of thinking like that actually it's better to take on a position, it's better to take on a responsibility or a duty and fail and learn something than to not take it on at all. And that's a difficult one, but I think in the end we learn a lot more and we mature, we grow a lot more by taking these things on and actually learning from them. Or a meditation retreat, it's like all these defilements and all these difficulties and pain in the knees and pain in the back and pain in the head or whatever. And it would have been better if I just didn't do this retreat. I wouldn't have to put up with this. But then did you learn something from the retreat? So it's looking like, even if we feel like we failed at something, if we learned something from it and we can mature and better ourselves in the future, then it wasn't actually a failure, it was a learning experience. This next one, I think Longpo Pasano would have to speak to it, but since I'm doing Q&A, did the practice become directed by the Dhamma, or did he need to further improve his meditation skills? I'm tempted to give a Longpo Pasano answer to this and just say yes. Yes, it's directed by Dhamma, and yes, perhaps he still needed to improve. I think at that point in the path, though, it's not even about meditation skills per se. It's about the integrated path and how it's all working together. And there's a saying of the Thai Ajahns, when the Noble Eightfold Path comes together at one point in the mind, that's the breakthrough. And so the path coming together, whether it's meditation or not meditation, the mind is the mind. And the path is developed, say we call it the Noble Eightfold Path, but there's just the mind, there's just the heart. And we work on all these different aspects of behavior of body, speech, and mind, but it really comes together in the heart as one. And so that realization for Longpo Cha, my thought on that is kind of like, that was an important factor for right view for him. When he heard that teaching from Ajahn Mun, it was like, oh, this is important. This is one of the key instructions that is really important to understand. And he didn't talk about his personal practice so much. He hinted at it sometimes, and he kind of criticized himself sometimes and joked about himself sometimes, and was quite humble about how he was in the practice, about it, dealing with his own anger, for example. So yeah, he probably right after that, yes, he needed to continue to be on the path, but it's hard to say. Dear Ajahn, how do you concentrate on breathing? Thank you. It's actually a very good question, because it's not always apparent, like how to start that. Just focus on the breath. So when we say focus on the breath or look at the breath, what it is it's just feeling the breath. So as the breath, the cool air coming in, the warm air coming out, if we can feel it, if we feel it, then we're focused on the breath. If we feel it, then in that moment, that one breath, we're concentrating on the breathing. So we don't need to think breath, 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 or in, out, 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 but just feel it, feeling the breath. And we can do it right now. We can at least do it for one breath. And so just feeling one breath, that's concentrating on the breathing. But it is easy to get critical of ourselves, like, oh, I couldn't, I lost it after one breath, or I lost it after 3 breaths. You can also use counting if you want to try to concentrate more on the breathing and cut through the distracted mind. You can try counting your breaths, like 1 breath in, 1 breath out, 2 breaths in, 2 breaths out, and so on. So, in a nutshell, that's just feeling it. I just try to remind myself just to feel the breath. That's the questions from yesterday. And from today. Thank you, Ajahn. I am practicing with the elements during walking meditation, especially when I contemplate on the matter, both internally and externally. For example, when I consider myself in relation to a piece of furniture, and then in relation to birds flying around me, I am wondering if this is an identified practice, and in any case, if it seems useful. The risk I see is in identifying with consciousness as some self-essence that I have in common with other animate things. But on the other hand, this seems like a more complete view for my personal contemplation. These kinds of questions are a little bit difficult to answer. Because it's still within the framework of trying to define oneself as something in relation to other things, rather than reframing one's experience in terms of the Four Noble Truths. One part of the question that jumped out at me, though, is like, the risk I see is identifying with consciousness, ... I don't know if there's like a risk per se. What's risky is not keeping the precepts. In terms of the subtleties of view, if one is a kind person and living a life of integrity, then these subtleties of view, we just keep working at it over time. But one good thing to come back to really is the Four Noble Truths. Suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path. Because to kind of get out of that rut a little bit of trying to figure out what we are, because the Buddha didn't answer that. The Buddha said what we aren't. We aren't form, we aren't feeling, we aren't perception, we aren't mental formations, we aren't consciousness. Although there is consciousness, it's good to contemplate consciousness itself. And this question in the beginning is kind of hinting at that sense of not identifying either, not non-identification. But consciousness is more like conscious experience. It's the factor of those aggregates that allows there to be experience, conscious experience, through the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, through the thoughts. So that's the vijnana dhatu, that's the consciousness element. We don't need to think of it as in us or in things, it's just present, it is. Kind of like Ajahn Ñāṇiko bringing up the point that thinking about the mind, not the mind is in the body, but the body is in the mind. You could say that about consciousness. Is consciousness in the body, or is the body in consciousness? So we can also kind of think about it. Question is the one that always makes me nervous. It was inevitable that it was going to be asked. It was just a matter of time. Can you please speak to this feeling of righteous indignation, how to overcome it within myself, how to not get so bothered when I see it in others, and how I might encourage a discourse among my friends and loved ones that isn't so strongly fueled by this feeling? Also, do monks vote? Y'all are wonderful. Many, many thanks. That's the one I get nervous about. Do monks vote? Well, I could try to tie it all together. Feeling of righteous indignation is pretty common, and not just in America, but worldwide. Like I've lived in Thailand for 6.5 years, and one thing I learned in living in Thailand is people are people, and Thais have the whole range of personalities, and Americans have the whole range of personalities and types. And I got the question many times. People here who have never been to Thailand would say, "Are all Thai monks like Ajahn Seik?" No. Not all Thai monks are like Ajahn Seik. So people are people. That's one thing to think about first. And righteous indignation, it's a real, if we get righteous, and then the conversation's over. It's not really a conversation. It's just, unless we're surrounded by people who absolutely 100% agree with everything we think about the situation, it's not going to be much of a conversation. We're just going to want to walk out of the room or go put our head in the sand somewhere. So that's really all we can do, is overcome it in ourselves. And it's up to each individual to see the drawback of it, but then it's kind of got a tantalizing quality to it, so it's kind of addictive. It's kind of like watching the news. Like, it makes us enraged every single time we watch it, without exception, yet we can't stop doing it. So it's like why is that? There's some sort of draw or pull, or maybe we think we're staying on top of things, we're staying informed somehow, and that's important. It's gonna maybe make a change in the world if I'm aware of these things or whatever. But just to come back, I think it was brilliant, Ajahn Amaro's talk last night, coming back to the feeling. And playing with things that trigger us, and then thinking of whatever triggers us, and then flipping it around immediately, and rather than absorbing into the story, then absorbing into the feeling. And that was just I was so happy he taught about that last night, and I think that's just so timely and important. And it's a very good teaching that's for these times. I think these times are ripe for Dhamma insight if we use them in the proper way. Do monks vote? We're not supposed to, in this lineage anyway. I guess legally we could, but we don't recommend it. And I know I wouldn't, because I wouldn't feel like it was in line with samana sanya, or the perception of being a religious seeker. And I can also talk about that a little bit more in terms of, it comes back to that sense of seeing people as people. And they're the Democrats and Republicans I know, and they're kind people who wouldn't harm anybody. And so it's like, if I was to vote, I feel like I'd be like linking myself with, say, one side or the other, and then that then excludes the other side. It excludes all the people I know and love on the other side. And for me, that wouldn't feel right as a monk. I'm not saying lay people shouldn't vote. Also, it reminds me of it makes me think of kind of a interesting sutta where I think it's called Attraction, and it's in the Anguttara Nikaya Book of the Fours. And the Buddha just and I think this is a very apt sutta for now. So like say, and this also ties in with voting, which I'll tie it in afterwards. So there's the first type of attraction, which is, let's maybe not call it attraction. Let's see, I have to think about how to frame this. Maybe we can think of it as goodwill. So there's goodwill born of goodwill. There's goodwill born of aversion. There's aversion born of goodwill, and there's aversion born of aversion. So how is that? So there's the case where we like somebody, and someone we don't know praises the person we like. And so that we develop goodwill for this person we don't know. We develop goodwill for them. That's how there's goodwill born of goodwill. So that person we don't know has goodwill for this person we like. Then we develop goodwill for that person. Then there's goodwill born of aversion. So there's somebody we don't like, and another person we don't know criticizes them. So we like them because they criticized the person we don't like. That's goodwill born of aversion. Then there's aversion born of criticizes them. They criticize the person we like. And so then we feel aversion toward that person who criticized the person we like. That's aversion born of goodwill. And then, let's see, aversion born of aversion. There's someone we don't like. This person we don't know comes around and says, and basically praises the person we don't like. And then we feel aversion. There's the person we like, and then they develop, actually, wait. I'm not sure if I can finish this one, but you get the idea. So there's basically, this is a way that if somebody praises somebody we like that, we like them. If somebody criticizes somebody we don't like that. And if somebody criticizes somebody we like, then we feel aversion toward the person doing that criticism. So in terms of say like voting, if somebody asks me, "Are you going to vote?" and then I vote for the person they like, they'll like me. But if I vote for the person they don't, it's simple how contact and feeling work like that. And I know probably it's like, but now, it's so important and the world's going to end or whatever. And but I mean, this is also a teaching in not sure. So we have to. It's good to question our knowledge of things. So like, basically, this sutta comes to mind again when say like we can feel so strongly about, say, like political candidates, using now as an example, and I know everybody will probably feel very strongly about this in their own way. And so like if information comes out that is negative towards someone we don't like, we'll tend to take it to be true because it's negative and it's to the person we don't like, so it must be true. So okay, and so if it's positive toward the person we don't like, it probably is true. So that's how we might think, well, yeah, but I'm really unbiased and so on, but are we really? And really questioning deeply. If we aren't biased in that way, then that's Dhamma. That's Dhamma practice. That's applying not sure. And this is like kind of the razor's edge we're walking right now, and that I think these times are probably really good for Dhamma insight if we see it through the lens of Dhamma, if we see it through the lens of not sure. So sorry if I said anything that was unpleasant there. I know it's a touchy subject. How to be in retreat and try to practice without inviting craving, tanha, into the mix. I am faced with similar challenges in almost every retreat. Either trying too hard and suffering from the tanha, or slacking off. How to find and know that we are applying right effort. The way until we practice for a long time and develop some sort of equanimity. I also had this experience when I was a junior monk, as I was talking about previously, where going up and down in these heavenly states and then hellish states and happiness and feeling really low. And after a few years, it sort of evened out, and it was not as exciting, but it was more peaceful, it was better. So I think this is one of those where it does take time and experience, but there needs to be a constant. So having some sort of constant that is a thread through in between retreats and a constant thread through all the retreats, maybe the 5 precepts, for example, we need a constant or a thread as a vantage point so that we don't separate our time in retreat from our daily life to the next retreat to daily life. If the retreats are separate from our lives and it's like this block that I'm focusing on, perhaps a lot of retreat centers, most retreat centers, you might have paid money to do the retreat, and so it's like you might have an expectation. So of course you're going to be tight and want to practice really hard and get as much out of the retreat as possible. And then it's like I'm practicing too hard, you run yourself into the ground, slack off, and then it's too loose. And so because we have these expectations about what we want to get from a retreat, then we're either too tight or too loose. We're really going for it. We get burnt out. We slack off, and then it's like, oh, how much more of this can I take? So I would say doing our best to go into a retreat open-minded and just saying, let's just be at ease. Let's just set the motivation to develop a sense of ease and well-being during this retreat and see where that takes you. Say like, sit when they say sit, walk when they say walk. Just follow the schedule. We don't have to go like above and beyond. Just following like on this retreat, following the 8 precepts and following the basic schedule and not doing anything extra on top of that is already really good. And some people will do extra meditation. They'll be feeling like they want to sit late into the night or start early in the morning. And that's great, but we have to gauge that. So just following the schedule and just following the precepts as it's laid out is really good already. 227 precepts. But then that is tanha, that is the desire mind, like wanting to say like, no, I need more. I need more precepts than that. I need more austerities. I need more than what's already laid out as, say, the bare minimum. Because I want to be going above and beyond. I want to be getting extra credit in this. I want to get in, I don't just want an A, I want an A+. I want an A+++. So it's like wanting to really go above and beyond and get the best. And perhaps it's not even tanha, perhaps it's coming from chanda or dhamma chanda. It could even be wholesome, but it might not be sustainable. So we might end up wearing ourselves out with that kind of practicing like that. So we don't yet have that long enduring mind that allows us to gauge ourselves and find, can I, but at the same time not burning out and not doing something that's unsustainable. When the Buddha talks about the 4 establishments of mindfulness and how one remains focused on the mind in and of itself, what is the object of the mind? Is the direct attention to the physical brain for breathing? Is the direct attention to the physical brain for breathing in and breathing out? To the physical brain. Oh, do we focus on the brain? I think that's it. When I tried to remain focused to the heart, I could sense the feeling of gladness. Is that the mind or the feeling? Again, this is something where I don't think we need to call it gladness, and it's in, say, the heart center. Say, like, to the point where if we develop the meditation to the point where there's joy arising and we feel a sense of ease and contentment and well-being, and the heart starts to open up and the heart actually sings that it has that sense of ease and contentment, then rather than needing to know exactly what it is, it's more like just abiding in it and trusting that's what it is. We don't really need to label it or know exactly how to designate it. There is that aspect of the mind, like some people might be more scientific minded. This is called well, there's 2 types. There's the Vitakka Charita, the personality type that thinks a lot. And there's the Puti Charita, which is like the scientific thing. But actually what is that? That's also the hindrance of doubt. So to be careful of that particular question, or that wanting to know, like, what is that? What was that? That was amazing. Wow. But then just trusting in the experience and coming back to actually feeling the experience, actually experiencing the experience. That's pretty important. So for like, I don't, Ajahn Lee, who I was just talking about, he does have a method where you focus your attention on the center of the brain. But that's more like if people want to check that out on their own, that's fine. That could be found on Access to Insight in Keeping the Breath in Mind, I believe, or Methods of Meditation. It might be Keeping the Breath in Mind where that method is talked about. So you could try that, but generally we say just focusing on the sensation of the breath flowing in and out of the nostrils, and not necessarily like in the brain. And yeah, you could try focusing on the heart center if there's a sense of happiness or a physical base for that well-being that's coming out at that point. I've been told that it's not good to focus on the beating heart, on like the physical heart, as a meditation object. And I don't know why that is, but I did try it, and it was kind of strangely unpleasant and didn't have that good of an effect. So I would think, yeah, if there's a feeling arising at the heart chakra or the heart center, fine, but be careful of focusing on like the physical heart, the beating heart. And last one, and then the next one is an appreciation, so I'll go through this one and the next one. Well, and then there's one more. I think I could finish them. This question is, do you have practice suggestions for issues of safety and control? Thank you. I am assuming this would refer to the pandemic, in terms of safety and like, having rules that keep us safe and stuff like that. But not 100% sure that's what this is referring to. I could say in terms of safety, like in terms of safety, yeah, it's good to be safe, but not at the cost of, say, our basic well-being in terms of like giving into fear. Like, yes, definitely be safe, going out in society or whatever. There are things happening, and acknowledging that. At the same time, don't let it, the fear take over completely in terms of like I've heard stories of, people who didn't come out of their house for months. It's like, even when they said, "Oh, it's okay, you can come out of your house now," they wouldn't come out of their house. So like not letting the fear take over completely. That's very important. And something that can be helpful for this is just death contemplation. Like, death is going to come at some point, and we do want to have an experience that's, say, worth being present for. And so, in terms of like control, like this comes up maybe in the monastery, like how much to control. And my own style is just like, well, just keep a distance, we want this to be a safe space for people. Keep a distance if they're outside. We're not going to be like harsh with them. If you want them to wear a mask, rather than telling them directly, you could put one on yourself or something like that. Finding ways to not embarrass people, not have people lose face. Keep the monastery like as a sanctuary or a safe space for all types of people. This is important, but it's touchy. Like, you got to be. It's a touchy situation. You got to be really careful, and sometimes maybe there does need to be some control or standards put in place, but we don't want that to, say, split us from our friends and relatives who may see things differently than us, and we gotta be careful. Sometimes it might mean just stepping away for a while, keeping distance for a while. Dhamma practice is very helpful with this, really just getting into that sense of the mind of letting go. This is where righteous indignation can come up really easily. And so, but it's not easy. Acknowledging it's not easy. These are difficult times, and really got to feel it out depending on your situation. Dear Ajahns, I was thinking of sending this at the end of the retreat, but motivated by Ajahn Titapanyo's really nice Dhamma talk on gratitude and the fact that I can die in my next breath, I send it now. Very good. I just wanted to wholeheartedly thank all the organizers and everyone involved in making this retreat possible, especially to Lungpor Pasano for sharing his wisdom despite feeling not so well, to Ajahn Krunadhammo for his teachings and humbleness, to Ajahn Ñāṇiko for being such an inspiration, and to whoever had the brilliant idea to invite Ajahn Amaro as a guest speaker. I can take credit for the idea of inviting a guest speaker, but I have to say it was Lungpor Pasano's idea to invite Ajahn Amaro specifically, so we can give him the credit for the Ajahn Amaro invite. It has been an extremely enriching experience, and being able to sit with other like-minded people has been wonderful. Today has been the most calm and peaceful day of the year for me. Deep gratitude for that. In advance, I would like to request, do please consider doing online retreats again, extremely helpful to those of us physically distant from monasteries, with much appreciation and metta. Sadhu, thank you very much, the appreciation. Final question. Hello, Ajahns. Could you speak a bit about the differences in relationship between craving and clinging? How should one relate to each in practice? Thank you. You can't really talk that much about it without a whole Dhamma talk. And really there's a lot of, Lungpor Pasano did, this question would have possibly been asked yesterday, and Lungpor Pasano did, he addressed the 4 types of clinging in his Dhamma reflection this morning, which can give a little bit of a sense of the relationship between those. So yeah, I might just leave it at that.